Episode 1. What is abnormal child psychology? Imagine a 6-year-old child throwing tantrums in class, biting other children, refusing to speak at home, and waking up at night screaming in terror. Is this normal? Is this just a phase? Or is something deeper unfolding beneath the surface? For centuries, the world believed children were simply little adults, emotionally simpler, less complex. But what if that belief cost generations of children their emotional well-being? Welcome to Mind Diagnosis Lab, and to the very first episode of our series, Inside the Mind of a Growing Child. Today we begin with a foundational question. What is abnormal child psychology? It's more than a scientific field. It's a lens. A way of seeing behind the behaviors, the outbursts, the shutdowns, the fears, the fights, and asking not, what's wrong with this child, but what happened to this child? And what's developing underneath? Part 1. A discipline denied. Abnormal child psychology, as a formal field of study, is astonishingly young. While adults have been the focus of psychiatry and psychology for over a century, children were largely left out until the late 20th century. Only in the 1980s did the field begin to grow with force. So what took so long? Let's go back. In medieval Europe, children were seen as miniature adults. They wore adult clothes, worked adult jobs, faced adult punishments. There was no such thing as childhood in the way we understand it today. Emotional struggles were often labeled as misbehavior, or ignored entirely. It wasn't until the late 1800s that a few thinkers began to suggest that children might have unique psychological needs. One of them was Lightner Whitmer, who in 1896 founded the first psychological clinic in the US, focused on children with learning and behavioral problems. He didn't just test children, he worked with them. He designed interventions. He saw them as changeable, dynamic human beings. And that was revolutionary. By the early 1900s, other clinics followed. In 1908, Henry Goddard opened a training center for children with intellectual disabilities. But Goddard's views took a darker turn. He believed that intelligence and mental problems were inherited. In his book, The Kallikak Family, he claimed that feeble-mindedness was passed down through bad blood. His ideas fueled eugenic policies, including forced sterilization laws. Even as the field grew, its roots were tangled with dangerous ideologies. And beyond those early pioneers, the field faced 4 major roadblocks that delayed progress for decades. Part 2. 4 roadblocks to progress. 1. The nature versus nurture debate. For most of the 20th century, scientists debated, are children born with mental disorders, or do environments create them? The debate stalled progress. Many clung to one side or the other, refusing to see the middle ground. Today we know, genes and environments are always interacting. A child may inherit a predisposition to anxiety, but whether that anxiety becomes a disorder depends on parenting, trauma, culture, school support, and more. 2. The disease model. Mental illness was seen through the lens of disease. You either had it or you didn't. This rigid model made it difficult to understand the fluid, developmental nature of child behavior. Children who didn't meet neat diagnostic boxes were misunderstood or mistreated. 3. The testing movement. As intelligence tests became popular in the early 1900s, children were assessed and labeled more than they were helped. Those with low scores were tracked into institutions. IQ became destiny. In 1972, the Larry P.V. Riles case exposed how IQ tests were being used to misclassify black children in California. The court ruled the practice unconstitutional, a landmark decision for equity in child psychology. 4. The miniature adult assumption. Even when child psychology began gaining recognition, many still believed children's disorders were just smaller versions of adult ones. But children aren't adults in little bodies. Their brains are still developing. Their emotions are raw. Their communication limited. Their dependency profound. For instance, it was widely believed that children couldn't experience depression. Why? because some theorists said they didn't have a fully developed superego, the internal judge that produces guilt and shame. This myth held on until the 1940s, when psychiatrist René Spitz documented emotional withdrawal and despair in institutionalized infants who lacked human affection. He showed that even babies could experience profound emotional suffering. Part 3. What is abnormal child psychology? It's the scientific study of when and how development veers off its expected path, and what can be done to understand, prevent, and treat those deviations. But it doesn't begin with symptoms. It begins with 5 powerful developmental themes described by Dr. Linda Wilmshurst. Part 4. The 5 developmental themes. The first theme is development follows a predictable path. Children typically learn to crawl before walking, speak before reading, trust before exploring. If we don't understand the normal trajectory, we can't recognize when development is off. Theme 2. Maladaptive behavior is a deviation from that path. For example, temper tantrums at age 2 are expected. At age 10, that may suggest deeper emotional dysregulation. Theme 3. Maladaptive behavior exists on a continuum. It's not black and white. It's not just disordered or normal. A child might show mild, moderate, or severe challenges, and that can evolve over time. Mental health is a moving target, not a fixed label. Theme 4. Behavior is influenced by individual, interpersonal, and cultural factors. Is a child's restlessness due to ADHD or hunger? Is social withdrawal due to trauma or cultural norms? Is school refusal defiance or a fear of bullying? The context matters, always. The 5th theme is theory matters, but no one theory is enough. Biological, cognitive, behavioral, attachment-based, systemic. To understand a child, you need multiple lenses. No one theory explains everything, but each adds a vital piece. Part 5. The K3 paradigm, a clinical compass. To guide practitioners, Wilmshurst introduces the K3 paradigm, a simple but powerful framework made up of 3 essential knowledge domains. 1. Knowledge of normal developmental expectations. What should a 3-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old be able to do? Emotionally, cognitively, socially? 2. Knowledge of sources of influence. What are the child's internal traits, temperament, genetics, attachment style, and external ones, family, school, culture, trauma history? 3. Knowledge of theoretical models. What perspectives can help us make sense of what we're seeing? Is this behavior best explained by a trauma model, a learning theory, or a neurodevelopmental framework? The K3 paradigm ensures that we don't rush to label or punish. Instead, we observe, understand, and support. Part 6. Why this matters. Why should you care about all this? Because today, nearly 1 in 5 children experience a mental health disorder, and fewer than half receive treatment. Because suicide is now the 2nd leading cause of death among youth ages 10 to 24. Because the earlier we intervene, the better the outcomes. Because every adult disorder, depression, anxiety, addiction, personality disorder, often starts in childhood. And because behind every problem child is a story that needs to be told, understood, and respected. When we understand abnormal child psychology, we stop blaming children. We stop overdiagnosing and undersupporting. We stop saying, "What's wrong with this kid?" and start asking, "What does this child need?" So join us on this journey. In future episodes, we'll explore the theories that explain childhood disorders. We'll break down specific conditions, ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, trauma, one by one. We'll share real stories, surprising research, and science-backed solutions. Because this isn't just about understanding kids, it's about giving them a better future. Subscribe, stay curious, and remember, the mind of a child isn't broken, it's becoming. This is Mind Diagnosis Lab. Let's decode the mind, one child at a time.